You are listening to MSP 1337. I'm your host, Chris Johnson, and I'd like to thank you for joining us today. First and foremost, I'd like to thank our sponsor, MSP-Ignite. MSP-Ignite offers a peer group experience that is unique to managed service providers in the technology industry. If you are serious about implementing a model for success through sharing and collaboration of best practices, this is the best way to do it. Head on over to msp-ignite.com to get more information. All right, on to the show. Welcome, everybody, to this episode of MSP 1337. I'm joined this week by Dorian Cougias. Welcome, Dorian.
Thank you very, very much.
Glad I totally butchered your name, didn't I?
Yeah, that's all right. It's Cougias.
Cougias. It's like I just had that moment in my head, and it's like if I enunciate the syllables correctly, I'll still get it wrong. So Dorian, with Unified Controls Framework, everybody that's listening, it's important to know that because of what Dorian does. And so Dorian and I have had a couple conversations, and the topic for this week is know your client, know your customer, know who you're working with. And this is coming off of a 2-part series where we talked about knowing your vendors, like how do you vet them? What's the checklist? What's their roadmap? Those types of things. So as we kind of come full circle, this is probably one that not sure why it took this long to get to having this conversation, but there was a post on LinkedIn, Dorian, that you had done, and you were asking the question, do you know your customer? And we like in the MSP space to say, do you know your client? And that's kind of where I wanted to start this conversation with you for our audience is to, how did this start? Obviously, this is bigger than Unified Controls Framework, but you picked up on something that is really what I think is most important is, do you know the people that you're working with?
Exactly. Unified Compliance Framework started working with Tag Vault and started working with a bunch of the other folks in the what I call compliance as code universe. And Security Scorecard is a client, Security AI is a client, a bunch of others. And this began when we were all talking about scoring and organizations' truth posture.
Sure.
I'm gonna put these two things out there: truth posture and security posture.
Yep.
And so truth posture is the organization who the organization says it is. That's the truth posture. Security posture is the organization as secure as they say they are. You know, it's one thing to pen test. It's another thing to have a Thomson Reuters, a bunch of other organizations through APIs go on out and actually do security testing, map it against the CVE, CWE, OWASP, and MITRE ATT&CK framework, and come back and say, hey, here's your real score.
Which is kind of like two truths.
And so that's how it began. I'm sorry, what?
It's like having two truths, right? So you know
Exactly.
what you built, you know that you built it following a blueprint, and then you built it, but that doesn't mean that it stayed true to course from the posture that you're evaluating it against.
Absolutely. Because things change. You know,
right.
Software gets updated, code gets added. Lord, I know code gets added.
Right.
And then you have to continually check yourself, but more importantly, you do have to continue to check your clients,
right,
and your vendors. And because we do a lot of work with the U.S. State Department, we are required at Unified Compliance to know who our clients are. And so what happens is it's very interesting when they ask the question. It's not just the security posture of what's going on. It's are the owners of the organization who they say they are? Are the owners of the organization, are the board members of the organization who they say they are? And funny enough, I looked at my own organization because I know who I know who my board members are, and your listeners can go do the same thing. Go look at Unified Compliance board members on LinkedIn. I found these 5 people who said they were board members of the Unified Compliance Framework, and you would think that as the CEO and co-founder, so I've been here day one of Unified Compliance Framework, that I would know who all of the board members were. And I found 4 people who said they're on my board. And I reached out to them and said, hi, I'm the co-founder. Who are you?
I'm one of your board members, right?
That's what one of the guys said. He said, I'm a board member. And I said, well, wow, funny how that works, because I'd love to know what board meeting you were at that.
Yeah,
because I
that
think
I
I've made
missed.
them all.
Yeah.
Did I miss a board meeting somewhere? Did we vote you in? And it was very, very interesting. So you have to do research. There are people out there in this day and age that has some major huevos on them who
Right.
will say they are this or they are that. And which then brought us into more research on the kinds of things that you can find out. Thomson Reuters has this really, really brilliant API that combines Equifax, Experian, and TransUnion, and Department of Justice records and various states' criminal court records. And by the way, you and I were talking last time. You said, where's the education stuff? There, the education stuff is in there,
Right.
and there's no excuse in today's market, if you have a real good GRC tool, not to be able to give that GRC tool a user's information and say, tell me the truth about this user when they're going through, a security check, when they're going through a background check, because that data can be found. It can be pulled in through an API, and grcschema.org even has the JSON structure of what that person's record should look like.
So a question on that I think is kind of interesting. Well, a couple questions. One is, where do you stop with the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon? Like, how far out do I go? Right. Like, so if I'm asking you the question, like, to figure out if I know you, then I probably need to know more than just you. Right. So now I'm asking questions about the you that you know, right? Like, so like you said, who are your board members and are they all on your board? I feel like there's like, so like I'll just give you an example of where this question is coming from. Back when I had my MSP, we had a contractor that worked for us. He was a 1099 contractor. We had found him through OnForce. I think OnForce has changed its name now. I think they're owned by somebody else. And we had a great working relationship with this guy. I mean, when I say great, like we were like, this guy really needs to come on board and work for us full time. And we're like 2 years into having him as a 1099 contractor. He wasn't full time, but that's where we were going with this. And so we ran him through background check, passed background check. And then after he had signed his employment paperwork, we set him up with direct deposit payroll. Well, with direct deposit, they asked for a couple key questions. One of them is your social security number. He provided a number that was exactly the number of digits for a social security number. And lo and behold, it came back as not valid, as in not citizen of the United States, as in he was now on 18 years of violating his current student visa to be in the United States. All of it tied to his parents are citizens, his siblings are citizens. But when he came over, because he wasn't born in the US, when he turned 18, because he didn't go and get his citizenship taken care of, he was now in direct violation. And it's like, and this is the state of California. So like now we're in like this huge world of hurt potentially. Sure. And we truly thought we had done due diligence. We really did. And in fact, I would have argued that someone else was doing due diligence too before it ever got to me needing to do my own due diligence, because he'd already passed a background check.
Because he came through the other organization. Sure.
So basically the way he got through the other one is he chose not to provide the social security number, provided his driver's license number, which he has a legitimate driver's license number. And then because there was no, charges again, no criminal record, he came back with a clean slate. They didn't ask him like, hey, are you a US citizen in the statement? Or he avoided that question and they somehow missed it. I don't know. But my point is that's one example. That's the people example. But like, as I'm evaluating an organization, the client, like, where do you stop?
Right. It's a question of risk. It really is. It's so part of what we're doing, and I'm doing the same thing now on organizations. So the U.S. government has this thing called the CPE list that the National Vulnerability Database is built on. Well, they handed it to us to do some cleanup, and I found out that 67% of the names in there are wrong. And we started to do some cleanup on finding these organizations and finding out, about these organizations and where were they headquartered.
Sure.
And very interestingly, and funny enough, we had a budget meeting right before I came here. It cost me $2,800 in hitting Clearbit and hitting UpLead and hitting Crunchbase and hitting Spiza and hitting Thomson Reuters and hitting. Excuse me. It took 7 different APIs, very robust APIs, to find out just the truth side of who these organizations were, and then create the listing of organizations that had built software that nobody had, that are running systems that nobody knows where they live. And I sent that back to one of my clients in the U.S. government. I'm not going to name names because I don't want to get my client in trouble and I don't want to have them suing me. But let's just say it's not a state government. It's the U.S. government.
It's the government.
The government running software that's been running for 7 years now on, let's just say, not uncritical systems that we can't find where the vendor ever lived. Let that sink in.
Yeah.
And by the way, there are vulnerabilities in this software and there are no patches to it, but this is existing software that's out there that's come up. And when I went to go do the organizational check and provide this, this full robust schema of information about the organization, both the security stuff and the truth of it stuff, 15% of the organizations on the CPE list in the NVD, no one can find information on. No one.
So they either don't exist or the names have changed so many times since this started. Somewhere along the way, we lost track of who they've become.
Right. And they're in no database, they're in no anything. So how then do you, the question then becomes is, on a risk side, do you pull all that software out? Do you patch it the best you can? What do you do? And so my point is, there are amalgams of APIs that are out there that anybody can build in now. Now that 7 source check is a single API call for us, because we've amalgamated them to the back end, and any GRC tool should be able to do this. I mean, I'm a crap programmer. My team will tell you that. I was able to build it in with one guy within 12 days. So a real GRC tool should at least have this core suite that can go out, to an Equifax, to a TransUnion, to Spiza, to Thomson Reuters, to Security Scorecard, to Security AI, Crunchbase, get all that data, put it together and say, hey, here's a big package of stuff for you on both the truth of the organization side and of the technical side, because that capability should exist. And then if somebody slips through the fingers, slips through the cracks, then that's a real question of, are we really asking them the right questions about these people when they come in, or are we letting them slip through the cracks?
I mean, this is no different than, I've done many audits on businesses, and the question that often comes up is background checks. And if the organization's big enough, there's often this sort of like, I don't want to say pre-written rule, but it's like, we're going to now, going forward, do background checks on all new employees. But how do you, do the background checks on the existing employees when you're spending a few dollars, per background check? And so I have said, like, worst case scenario, you do them as you can afford to do them, right? So like, because the second part of that question would be, you were fine at the point in time the background check was done. does not mean that that background hasn't grown, right? Because every day we go forward, there's now new days in the past that something could have changed when a background check is performed. And it could be one of those things where in a background check, you find out that this person's had their identity stolen, or this person has had, any number of
Happened
things.
to me.
Right. I've been there myself, charged against you. So, as you kind of are explaining some of these pieces, it starts to feel like this is almost an overwhelming nightmare. But at the same time, there's a piece of this that says this should be almost trivial, right? Like you should at least know some of these key things about the people that you work with and the organizations that you are working with, right?
Right.
So if we're talking to an SMB, managed service provider, and or their clients, and doing the whole, do you know your client? Do you know your customer? Where do you start? What are the pieces that one should start with? And I know that's a loaded question because maybe there's not a specific, you should definitely start here, but there's got to be some sort of how do we wrangle this a little bit for the smaller guys?
Yeah, I was thinking about that. So you and I met because I did a survey, of 2,500 people and got a little over 1,000 answers back. And
I answered 999 times.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome.
And you changed your answer.
I'm good. Yeah. I made sure I took notes so I didn't repeat the same answers. Yeah.
What we're finding out is that I felt horrible because there isn't really a great tool. There was no winner of the GRC tools versus a dedicated, like a third-party risk tool versus a dedicated portal for doing it. There's some pretty sketchy ones out there.
Sure.
I would absolutely start first if you have a GRC tool, even the the least expensive one, OnSpring, ServiceNow, OpenGRC, GovReady. Ask them what the schema of the person is. That's where you need to start, and then go compare just the schema, what they can track or what they do track about a person. Go compare that to the schema at grcschema.com. Are they tracking education info? Are they tracking career records? Are they tracking this one has unclaimed assets, social media, fraud services, fraud service codes, adverse media reports, person risk reports. If they don't have any of those things in there, then you're using the wrong tool. I went to a SaaS portal. I went back and asked some of the people who said, hey, they're doing this stuff in a SaaS portal. I said, great, do me a favor. Give me the SaaS portal. I want to go and see what their schemas look like. And the one I looked at said, all it did was check, like you said, driver's license information,
right,
relatives, and other things not based on the person's social security number. Not based on the person's passport number.
Right, which would be a lot more thorough.
Yeah.
It makes me think
so
about...
I would say,
go ahead.
Well, let me just finish this up. So what I found is the sites that say, give me a current driver's license number plus your social security number, or if you're not a U.S. citizen, your passport number. Those are the sites that seem to have the most critical set of data.
Well, and I think we're going
the
there
sites
too.
That don't ask for those two things miss a whole bunch of stuff.
Well, and I think if your driver's license today has the gold star on it, a lot of the information that otherwise wasn't collected before is now been updated when you got that new driver's license. It makes me think about the Frank, Catch Me If You Can.
Frank, oh shoot, Abernathy or Frank?
Yeah, Abernathy. It's kind of crazy when you think about it. The Catch Me If You Can, Frank Abernathy, he now consults for the FBI. He's a very interesting character. I heard him speak a couple years back, and the things that he was able to get away with, all those years ago, people are still kind of getting away with that today. And there's really no excuse for it because our technology and our infrastructure and the tools that we have at our disposal, even some of the ones you've mentioned, it would have been pretty tough to skip past even some of the more basic check. Like, so as you were talking, I started thinking like, where do you start? So you could trivialize this and say, okay, well, let's at least start with background check. But when you do one, make sure that you're covering the 2 points that you said, driver's license and social security number. And if they don't have one or they don't want to disclose it, at least provide the passport number.
Right.
Because I think it's safe to say we don't want to give it away.
And driver's license or passport and social security number. Because when I looked at these portals, when I looked at who I could give data to through the APIs, because that's the way I'm looking at it. If I didn't give them both criteria, I didn't get back full information. Because if I gave them passport information, it didn't always give me the most updated. It didn't give me education information. It didn't give me updated addresses. It didn't give me a lot of things that the other gave me. And then if you need to check their social media, what you really need to do is you need to get their business email address, not their Gmail address, but their business email address. Because through business email address, a lot of these guys can then go on out and then check back through LinkedIn, check back through a lot of these things, get their Twitter accounts, because then you get to see what they're actually saying about people and what they're saying online. It's very interesting. There's a gentleman who's not going to be teaching at West Point anymore because somebody got some background information on him, was able to go on out and find out that this guy's been posting some really crazy ass right-wing Nazi bullcrap on this, goofy site over X and Y and Z, because he boldly used his email address.
So you're essentially saying check all email addresses you can get your hands on, including work email. So shift gears a little bit. We've talked a lot about the individuals that make up organizations, the individuals that will go and work at organizations. How does this sort of like tie into? Because I feel like if you have 10 employees in a company and 5 of them don't actually have a good background, like it definitely discredits the organization. It seems like there's more to it than that, though. I feel like what you said previously about finding an organization that's providing software or database solutions, what does that look like? Because I feel like that's as powerful as it is finding out about specific individuals in an organization.
It is. There's an entire schema of organizational information that you can find. And I'm going to go back to the experience, the others, the D&B. We have a what's called a cage ID for doing business with the military.
Okay.
And when we went through to get our cage ID, they did the whole, are you truthful? And they did the whole, are you technological? But more importantly, what was very interesting was for my senior staff, they also did the personal, they let me know that because we were going to be working within the State Department, they're going to be monitoring my senior staff's persona, digital personas. And everybody today has a digital persona. Right. And I'm going to clue you in on something. This is very interesting. We hired a gentleman that we then had to immediately fire. He didn't have a digital footprint.
Huh.
And we thought that was a good thing. And he came to our company offsite on day 2, and we had to test him for drugs. And because the hotel owner said, hey, all through the night, people have been coming to ask how to get to his room and needed a security card to get into that far to go give a delivery to his room through the middle of the night. Clued us in the next morning. The next morning he was looking a little wacky. And the COO and I decided, we do need to test this guy. I won't say who, but we thankfully got rid of him without that much problem. He did steal some equipment from us. And it turned out that his entire persona He hid from the digital universe because
Wow.
he was a wackadoodle and would go through. And after that, after he left us, he sued a very, very, very powerful company. The only reason we knew was because they subpoenaed us to present records about why we had to fire him and how long he lasted with us.
2 days.
And I said 2 days, under oath. I said, well, he lasted 2 days. Well, why'd you fire him? Because he was not coked out of his head, but
He wasn't doing
so,
well.
Yeah, he wasn't doing well. And so if you don't, in today's world, if you don't leave a digital footprint, that means you're masking something. Because just naturally, we leave a digital footprint.
We should be able to find something on them, right? Like there shouldn't be a zero. It shouldn't be a zero footprint.
Right. It shouldn't be a zero footprint. So if you're finding that, my dog has a digital footprint. Leo's on a special lot of pages.
Yeah.
Yeah. Leo's on a lot of pages. People can tell you that my dog's been out to, the island. And so when you're doing these things, the people in the organization, the leaders in the organization have to have a decent digital footprint. They have to be on notice that they're going to be monitored as a part of the organization's brand, right? And security brand and social brand. I don't want to sound all Black Mirror or anything, but people are looking at that these days.
So this, we could go on a rabbit trail here, because I think that this kind of gets into know your own entity, right? So we talk about, know your clients, but how well do we know our own teams? Because I think you said it well when you were saying you did a LinkedIn search and you're recognizing most of your board members, but there were a few that stood out that you were not familiar with. And when you checked into it, it was like one had his own truth about being on your board, and the rest obviously that was done. But like it brings questions like, when I think about my own team, right? Like, what kind of checking do I need to do? How frequently do I need to be checking up on them? Because today they're in my office doing exactly what I asked them to. Tonight they're on social media talking about how bad their experience was because they don't want to be there.
Right. We've actually put our folks on notice. Luckily we went virtual before COVID happened. We decided that we had people that really wanted to work from where they wanted to work, and they could. Sure. And they were doing it very, very well. So I said, okay, great, let's do that. And one of the caveats that I told people was, we are going to monitor your social media.
Yeah.
I want to know, and originally I told them, I said, I want to know if you're posting a whole bunch of crap during work.
Right.
I want to know. Because I had a friend, and the other reason I want to know that is I had a friend of mine who was, while he was on team meetings, could see one of his staff members posting all sorts of stuff.
Sure.
Up in TikTok. Yeah, like, oh, you didn't turn your camera on and you're on mute, not because you got a kid screaming in the background, but you're probably recording things on TikTok while we're working. I don't know if that's too cool. So, we said we did have a social media policy, and, that's part of what you have to do. You have to have you have to work with HR, you have to work with your legal folks to say, what can we do? And what's the right thing to do? When is it too far for us? And when is it not? I do want to know what my people are tweeting. I do want to know what my people are out there saying, because my clients are looking.
Right.
And I'd rather get ahead of it.
Because this is also how you better show how much you know about your clients as well, right? Because if the stuff I put on social media is reflective and positive towards the clients I'm working with, right. Great. If it's not, then the question gets asked, do you even know me? Because you're out there doing this. It's very counterintuitive.
It is. You have to. You have to know who's working for you. We had to know who was working for us before.
Sure.
You were talking about the Frank Abernathy thing. How did the kid get through most of those things? At least in the movie, I also read the book. Same thing in the book. He schmoozed people. Yeah. He got them not to ask the question.
Social engineering at its best.
At its best. Guy was brilliant at it. And so that's how your guy got through his
Right.
system.
Right.
And that's how, Mr. I was nobody. I couldn't find anybody. This guy was truly, man, he was smooth talking. He passed my bullshit test when we were going through, our senior engineer, who is really, really great guy. He's this guy from the Balkans who knows, he knows more math than I've ever heard of. He was asking this guy. So the kid was brilliant, but also a wackadoodle.
Yeah.
So he passed our stuff. Had we listened to what we weren't hearing.
Sure. The silence amongst the noise.
Yeah. Had we listened to the report that came back saying this guy doesn't exist.
Should have. He's right here.
Yeah, exactly. And had somebody had asked your guy, social security number, oh, there isn't one. It's the non-existence of.
Yeah, if you don't ask questions, then don't expect answers, right? So
Right.
If the question wasn't asked or it was couched in such a way that there was an easy way to answer without answering, yeah, you get those, you figure those loops out and you exploit them, even if it's not done intentionally. I think that the guy that I'm referring to, I don't think he intentionally was trying to deceive anybody. We flattered him when we said we'd love to have you come work for us full time. And that's where some of his guards that he had in place to protect himself slipped. In theory, it was already a done deal because he'd already gone through a background check. All he had to do now was provide his bank account details, which in turn wanted a little bit more information that he'd given in the past so that we could appropriately file taxes. If he had a work visa, a legitimate work visa, we could have still hired him, but he didn't have one.
Right.
So listen, I feel like this has been a great conversation. This is the first, I hope, of many to come, because I think the people that are out there listening to this have never really thought through what does it mean to understand and know the people that are working for your clients, nor do they have a true understanding, maybe up until this point, of how to go about finding the information so that they can make better decisions on the risks that they're taking on.
And I'm going to do a follow-up from this. I'm going to do some homework. You had said, what does it cost? What does it take to do this? So I'm going to do some due diligence on my end. I'm going to reach out to all of the various API vendors.
Okay.
And find out how many API hits it takes for me to find out full background information. I'm first going to do it on myself. Okay. I'm going to do it on a couple of my staff members, especially my one overseas guy. And I'm going to find out how many, what is the cost of finding out that information from the various sources through pure API hits, not through somebody's SaaS portal, because they're putting whatever pricing they're on, but through the what that's the APIs that SaaS portal hit.
Yep.
So I want to find out what that pricing is and who provides what, with what level of information. I guarantee you, Chris, I'm going to get back to you with that information.
Sounds good. I really appreciate that. Those of you listening, thanks, Dorian, for being on the show. And when we have some answers, we'll either do a bonus episode or we'll do a part 2 of this one. Thanks, everybody, and have a great week.
Thank you very much.